either by someone locally, often anonymously, here in this case in the Twin Cities, as a rock star in cybersecurity and wanted to give you some special recognition, or sometimes our own internal team that's like, that's someone we would love to come and be part of this day. So you deserve a little special recognition for your outsized contributions to cybersecurity here in Minnesota. Yes. So we'll start by, I also want to give a huge round of applause to everyone that is up here with me on our CISO panel. We know how very valuable everyone's time is, but especially for them to come and take the time out of their busy, and the 911, calls that we have to step out for. Cybersecurity never stops or sleeps. So again, great thanks to our panel. So without further ado, our honoree recognition, we're going to kick it off with Heather Tights from Donaldson, Director of Global Data Privacy. Heather? All right. Sarah Senshin from Jostens, a security analyst. All right, I think, Sarah? With us in spirit. She's here. Okay, well, I will hunt her down. You haven't learned anything about me. I find what I need. Ryan Manslip from Optum, Principal Information Security Engineer. All right. Joe Ketzner from Link Snacks, IT Security Analyst. All right. Mark Carafa from the John Roberts Company, CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. John Roberts is the company. Mark Carafa, with us in spirit. He was here at one point today. Guys are busy, we know. Perry Grove from Coat Hospitality, Director of IT. All right, right up front. Don't apologize, Sarah. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Michelle Glisson from Lifetime, Cybersecurity Analyst. All right. Karen Gilbertson, Coat Hospitality, VP of Technology and Projects. We'll get a round of applause for Karen. And yeah, thank you. Sam Dugan from U.S. Bank. Visa, all right. Cheers, Sam. Oh, got it. Older brother. Oh, yeah. I almost said in memoriam. No, on her behalf. Ooh. Lydia Durgacheva, Smart Care Solutions, Security Infrastructure Engineer. All right. Kevin Day, Marvin Windows and Doors, Application Programmer Analyst. All right. Rich Coleman from X Hydration, CISO. Rich. All right. Lisa Claycomb, Sunrise Bank, Senior Cybersecurity Engineer. All right. Jen Anderson, Mayo Clinic, Senior Information Security Analyst. Cheers. And this brings us to our esteemed panel here strategically at the end that are all up with us. Tina Meeker, our fabulous keynote speaker from today. Sleep Number Corporation, VP of Information Security, IT Infrastructure, and Enterprise Architecture. Be sure to check inside. There is a certificate. There's also a little gift from us with our thanks for your excellence in cybersecurity. So, Aunudrei Oliver, Allianz, Senior Director, Information Security, and Deputy CISO. Keith Richard, GreaterGood at CharityUSA.com company, Director of IT. And last but certainly not least, Avneet Hall from BMO, Third Party Governance Advisory, Financial Crimes Unit, and our moderator for today's panel. Thank you. So cheers, everyone. Thank you for everything you do in cybersecurity. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our panel so we don't steal any of their time. For the next hour, they're going to run us through securing the future, insights from CISOs and industry leaders discussing current cyber threats and strategic defense practices. Take it away.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone, for being here. It's been such a good day. It's very insightful conversations. Hello, panel. I want to start with some non-technical questions, try to get inside your mind, how you think. So starting off with, by all conservative estimates, every year there are 400,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs in the United States. So that's what the stats say. What's the challenge? Why, what do you think about this? There's people who disagree with that. Do you think that's conservative? Do you think that's overrated? And what can enterprises do to bridge that gap?
I'll start, if I may. As an industry, we've been talking about this for a long time, about the shortage of talent in the field. However, in the last, I'll say 2 years, I think that's changed. We have a lot of our colleagues right now are on the sidelines looking for work. Yeah. I've been in the cybersecurity field for 2 decades, and for most of that 2 decades, we had a negative unemployment rate, right? That has changed, and we need to get our friends who are on the sidelines back at work.
I'm not sure I could follow that one, but I agree wholeheartedly with that one. I think when we are talking to, I would say probably the new minds coming in, I think there's really a lot of confusion because cybersecurity can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So most of them, when I see them, they're bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. It's such a beautiful thing. But they want to get into IT, and I often tell them you need to be specific about what you mean in IT because it can go a few different ways. And number 2, why are you here? If you're here for the money, I need to make sure that you understand that that's probably not real. Not yet, anyway. And so what I'm talking to them about is really trying to hone your craft. Find something that you love to do in this space, and then people will pay you for that based on how much you love it. And so when we're having the conversations very early on, I think that's the thing that gets out. They see a lot of the job postings, and the recruiters don't do us any good as well. And I think that creates that stigma. But just like we sell products, job producers have to sell ideas, certificates, certifications, and degree programs. So I think there's a little bit of that going on. And I think that's created some of the challenge. But I think because the space is so vast, there's so many opportunities, we find that we lose them very early before they really get to that space. So I think the jobs are there. I think they're not there in the right capacity sometimes. But I think there's also more work that we can do at the very beginning to help them get off on the right foot and get them going in the right direction.
Yeah, I just want to echo what you've both said. I've seen it firsthand. A lot of friends of mine have tried to transition careers through certificate programs, and it's been very important for me to be able to reach out to people in my network to find those first jobs for them. It's tough to just jump into cyber security. You might need to jump into, I'm working on phone systems. I'm working on endpoint management. I'm working on identity, the tech support desk. But just being able to find those roles for the next generation.
Piggybacking off that, what skills for the next generation of emerging talent, and many of this are probably in the room and watching online too, what specific skills would you suggest they should acquire, learn as the threat landscape changes? Or not?
There's the obvious one, right? Let's say AI. Most people in security call it machine learning, but let's just be politically correct and say AI, right? I think that's one thing. I would say, though, if this is something that you really love, packet analysis is underrated, in my opinion, right? The ability to understand what happens on the wire. I don't, security, network, whatever. When you can understand what happens on the wire, then you can understand when it's not normal. And that's half the battle when you're in a battle, knowing what's normal and what's not normal. So I would always go back to the basics. I know that it is boring. You hate looking at IEEE standards and documents, but that really is the basis. I think that creates the foundation for you as you're moving through those things. It will get tough. If you don't love it, you will quit. It's just the way that it works. So if you get in early and you find, hey, this stuff is really not connecting with me, and I'm not really, can't find the connection, that could be an indicator, or it could be maybe you need a different way of approaching it. But I would say packet analysis is important. It's not, the end all be all, but if you can get that piece and those things resonate with you, the rest of the stuff will come, and then you can add all the other machine learning, AI buzzwords on top of that.
What's one common cyber myth or misconception you would like to debunk for the audience? And that can be, people you meet in everyday life that, they think when they hear you're in cybersecurity, they think about something, or even the technical audience, or it could be your board audience. What's something you'd like to set the record straight on?
I think cybersecurity is for everyone. I am not your central casting cybersecurity professional, but yet I've been doing it for 20 years. I didn't start in cyber because 20 years ago there was no such thing. I started as a technical writer, and to Aunudrei's point, whether you're getting into cyber or doing a career change, anyone can get into cyber by working on, part of a service desk team, network, application, pick your favorite, layer in the OSI model, right? And hone in on that, become an expert in that space. You're gonna do well in cybersecurity. I also think from a soft skill standpoint, we all need to be resilient and adaptable, and you have to be ready to change and be ready to evolve at all times. 20 years ago, completely different landscape. 20 years from now, it'll be a completely different landscape. It is a consistently changing environment, and you need to be accepting and embracing of change.
Any other thoughts? Keith?
Yeah, I think everyone in this room and online knows that the industry changes, every 3 years we're turning over to a new technology, or we're needing to pivot in the companies we work for. And the people that work in this industry need to be okay with rapid change. And whereas in the past you might have been able to be a sysadmin and you knew your network stack and that was fine. And we covered in the presentations today just the evolution in the history. I really enjoy diving in with where this industry was back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, and it can be so easy to jump in. I'm in a SaaS-based solution. I hit a couple check boxes. I don't quite know what is happening here, other than I'm more secure now. I think getting people excited about how it works, how we're able to help teams across organizations. I know, working with marketing teams, they want to be quick, they want to be fast, and you want to be able to meet them and be their partner in achieving what they need, but also being ready with current technology and advice to be able to help them.
Within your organizations, how do you manage the need for a robust cyber program while maintaining user experience and operational efficiency? Because what trade-offs do you give, or do you see your organization trading?
Operational efficiency, that's a very weird combination. I'm trying to put that together in my brain. Let me answer it this way. I think, and Tina's heard me say this before, I often tell my team, and they laugh at me when I say it because I say it quite often, but I tell them if your job is not to secure this organization, it's not your job. Your job is to create a culture that puts this first and make the experience of security great. And if you do that, it'll take care of itself. Because I think sometimes we get so involved in, I've got to lock this down, I've got to do this, I've got to say no to this, I got to do that, that it creates a very negative user experience. And when you do that, you actually poison the well that you're actually trying to drink from. And so what I tell people in this space is like, it doesn't have to be horrible. It doesn't have to be a negative experience. If you leave a meeting and ask yourself, will this person come back to this meeting with me the next time? And you say no, that should be a lesson for you to check where you are and how you're approaching the conversation. If we can shake the negative stigma of security, right, being the conversation of no, and make it more a conversation where they're willing to engage, it makes it so much easier. So what I tell the team is find ways to really promote or create the security experience. The rest of the things will happen. But it is really a change of thought for us, especially for those that have been in the space for a long time, right? From the days of firewalls and et cetera. But I would say that's probably the thing I think about the most is the experience around security really having a real valuable impact over how your programs work. So I think if you handle those things, the robustness of it, the trajectory of the program, more importantly, and the resiliency will come, as just part of that process.
I love what you said. Oh, please applaud. So, again, going back a couple decades, I'm sure some of you in the room may be old enough to remember. Do you remember the cable locks on your laptops? And that was such a big deal, and you had to have that cable lock on your laptop, and you think about it now, it's pretty hilarious, right? But it was so important, and it was in every policy that you had those cable locks on your laptops. I think, Aunudrei, what you said about just, things evolve, the landscape evolves. I've actually advocated to remove controls that no longer made sense. When I first started at Sleep Number, we had this, pre-boot password requirement. And that works in some cases, that might be necessary. And it was the number one complaint I got in all of my meet and greets is this pre-boot password, and half the time it didn't work, and they had to call the service desk, and it was just causing a number of problems. And nothing against the team who was there when I started, but that was kind of like they really latched onto that, this is how we're known, is that pre-boot password, that's how they know it. It's like, do you want to be known for that pre-boot password? So, long story short story long, we removed the pre-boot password. And people started to see that we were actually evaluating these controls. Do these make sense for this organization? And now, had we been the Department of Defense, that pre-boot password probably would make a lot of sense. But we were selling smart beds. So we removed that control, and I think at that point, we started to kind of get that, people started to look at us like they're actually thinking about this in a business sense.
Cool, thank you. One of the topics that I'm in third-party space and that I'm passionate about, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it, is the supply chain security. What do you rely on? What do you think is the best? Is it letting vendors do that? Is it creating in-house processes? And what lessons from recent supply chain attacks do you think are useful for enterprises to adopt?
On the supply chain side, I think, email is definitely the number one interface that we have with our vendors. So having processes in place, whether it's, an email security product or a very good security awareness training program to be able to identify when a problem is occurring to, prevent problems.
This is one of those topics I think probably is a layer, really an onion for me, because I think most often when we talk about third-party cyber risk management, I feel like we leave a little bit on the table because we don't talk about the footprint of those third parties. We don't talk about the footprint of the fourth parties or the fifth or the sixth. And so most of our efforts right now, I think most at least in my space, has really been around that third party, but I think there's value in understanding what happens downstream and having the correlating ability to connect those things. So you've got a vendor who has a vendor who's got a vendor who's got a vendor. How is that process working? What is the timeliness in which you guys are reviewing? Are they in your system? Are you in theirs? Like, how does that relationship work? And more importantly, and I talk to vendors at times, and because they always sell stuff, which is cool. But I talk to them at times, and I talk about what's the offboarding process. Like when we get rid of you, like procurement goes and does their thing, but how do you make sure that when you offboard that vendor, it's just as clean, there's a good process, and you can audit it? So for me, I think it's taking all those things together. SBOM is one of those things I think it should to really be part of the conversation with third party. Come in with your packet, leave with your packet kind of thing, and I think just making those connections upstream and downstream is the part where I think there's opportunities, because that answers the questions around supply chain. The way that you can minimize that risk is when you can understand that and obviously relate those SBOMs to those third-party vendors and have a significant, what I would say maybe decrease in risk if you can manage those. And I think that's probably part of the challenge that we see right now, just because of all the vendors that are coming through, all the integrations. I mean, just getting an API vendor who can supply an extension technically is a third party, right? So all of those things create an opportunity for us to really lose focus on where we need to concentrate, and I think that's one of those things I'm constantly trying to understand and try to get a better handle on.
Yeah, one addition, we've had really good success with our third-party risk assessment program to the point where our smaller vendors have come to us when they've had a breach or intrusion to let us know and ask for advice on how they should proceed, and that's been a good win for the team.
Definitely. So throughout your cyber careers, what's the most unexpected source of inspiration you've drawn that you've used professionally, but that's not coming from your cyber field?
Great question.
Like personally, I'll start. I'm part of a nonprofit called Empower. I'm a product of it myself. I came from a non-traditional background of certifications, workforce training program called Empower out on the East Coast, and it changed my life. Got a few certifications, got an introduction, foot in the door to cybersecurity. 7 years at Citigroup, and learned a lot. Had some amazing mentors to that. Today, I sit on the board and I volunteer. And talking to those students, who come from the same non-traditional background, who cannot get to college from Brooklyn, from Harlem, and seeing the passion, seeing their hunger, gets me motivated, because and I love that. I love still having that as part of my life, even though I'm now in Minneapolis. So that's my source of inspiration. Any stories you want to share?
I think for me, I unfortunately don't have as much time as I used to, but I teach at local colleges. So right now I do it as a guest instructor, usually one night here and there, where I used to have a part-time role at Dunwoody's cybersecurity program. You don't do that for the money, right? In fact, one time I did the calculation when I was working at Dunwoody, and I live in Zimmerman, Minnesota, which is about 45 miles northwest, and after you kind of calculate, the fuel and the time, I think I was actually paying to do it. But I met some really phenomenal students, some of which I still connect with today, and have actually reached out to me at some of these conferences, thank you for that course. And it inspires me. I think it's really important. So that's something that, if you are interested in teaching, there's a need at the college level, and a lot of community colleges and even tech schools would love to have anyone in this audience as practitioners share your knowledge with students, and that includes adult learners as well.
I think when you get to a point in your career, and from what I'm told, I guess I'm old, at least that's what my kids say. When you get to a point in your career and you've done the certifications and you've done all the other stuff, you kind of look around and you recognize that it's probably not a great place. And I think we in cybersecurity see it from a different lens. And I think we start asking the questions like, how do I want this legacy to go? How do I want this story to go? And I think for me right now, it's really trying to leave it better than I found it, right? I think we see a lot of things and oh my God, TikTok, don't get me started. So for me, it's just looking at the landscape and trying to understand, like, it's easy to take a negative view at it, but I just look at it as a challenge. Can I just do two things that make this thing a little bit better than I found it? And if I can do that, for me, that's really what drives a lot of the conversation. We do these things. I enjoy these things as well. So for me, it's just trying to find the ways to just make it a little bit better than I found it and hope that the next person does it. But that's probably a lot of my motivation.
Very nice. For me, lately, I've completely echo what you said. You know, you complete the schooling and the certifications, and you get to where you are in your career. And I've had the opportunity to work with a charity the past couple years. They run a school in Nairobi, Kenya, and it's being able to see what the team over there is doing to run their IT, and they have a very small budget. They're a self-funded charity, and I'm just able to bring back so much to what I do in my daily job, but it also just brings me quite a joy for the a couple hours a month I meet with them on Zoom and try to help them on their journey.
Very good. So how do you measure the success of a cybersecurity strategy beyond just no breaches? How internally to your teams, to your board as you speak to them, Tina, what are some KPIs or success criteria you think that when a company is doing that, they are succeeding? Or is no breaches a good enough?
First of all, you never measure your program by, and we have this conversation all the time. If you're measuring your program by a breach or not a breach, you're going to lose at the end of the day. It's again, so when we have these conversations, we'll have people that come by, hey, you guys are doing a great job. We haven't been on the news. That shouldn't be the reason that we're doing a good job. And I tell people that just because if that's how you're judging me now and it's positive, then I would assume the inverse is going to be positive when it does happen. So I want to make sure I set that expectation up front. That's not going to be the measure that we're going to use. I think when things are right when the business is looking for you in the meetings, when they're asking, hey, did somebody from security show up? Are they engaged on this? Are we talking with them? Does this make sense? Or they're asking about architecture things, or they're calling you into the things, and they're calling you in before the design is final, right? Just to get your opinion. I think that's when we're actually doing it well. I just had a young lady who just started on my team, and she's in security awareness and training, and she's awesome. And everybody's looking for her because she's always putting things up around the building for phishing attempts and pushing and all those types of things. So they actively are looking for her. Hey, did Christy do this? And I'm like, no, I don't think that's her, but she most of the time does. But it's those types of things when you can make it more about just the engagement and they don't actually realize that it's security related. That's how you know things are working well.
I think for us, we really base our strategy, and this sounds like Captain Obvious, but we base our strategy on, we are a company within an industry, and we have unique elements about our company, which creates a unique risk profile, right? So I mentioned earlier, those of you who were in the keynote talk, we are a retailer, we are a manufacturer, we are a technology company. So because we manufacture our product, we have 7 plants throughout the U.S. Plants are very prone to ransomware because plants are built for uptime, right? So putting special focus on those particular unique elements just based on the industry that we're in and the unique threats that face those capabilities.
Yeah, for
as an example.
Yeah, business continuity, all of that. That's very interesting. I want to talk about regulatory compliance. One thing, Europe has GDPR. As a Canadian bank, I deal with Canadian regulations, American regulations, and how can organizations effectively navigate and comply with evolving cybersecurity regulations? For example, one thing I have noticed, just observing the industry, is that if a company has a breach, they have to individually go to all these multiple organizations and fill out different forms. Like, why isn't there a central form, especially when you're dealing with a breach? That's just one thought I had. But what are your thoughts on that?
Being a smaller organization, I'd say having good partners that specialize in that area has been very helpful. It's not enough to have one lawyer on retainer. It's important to engage people in the community, see what they're doing, how you can use possibly a SaaS-based product to achieve those goals.
Yeah, I guess I would say, NIST does a pretty good job of really setting the foundation for a lot of things, right? If you are closely aligned to NIST, I think from a majority of things you're going to be fine. Even in my organization, we're dealing with DORA. Now, technically speaking, we're in the United States, but our parent company is out of Germany, so we deal with DORA. The reality of DORA is that it's not horribly different than what we do today. They may have some more things on continuity, resiliency, maybe on continuous monitoring, but it's not like it's Spanish and we're speaking French. They're all still closely related. I think if you are at least aligned for the most part to what you're seeing in NIST, it's not a huge uplift. I think more so it's just reporting times, what you actually report. AI was probably the biggest challenge I see where we saw stark differences in how we do it versus how it gets done overseas. But for the most part, I think the alignment is not as tough as it needs to be. I think having a team, and we're fortunate enough to have a team that they're constantly looking at those things. So as nuances pop up in different regulations, we get bought in to kind of be part of that conversation. If you're smaller SMB, it obviously creates more challenges. So I would say find a framework. That's always the best place to start. Align with the framework. Ask questions. There's always vendors. There's always vendors out there willing to help you get that extra step or that extra foot in the door on the framework and the process, and just stick with that. That probably would be the best thing I would say.
Similarly, our program is based off ISO 27002. We measure maturity based on NIST. I'm very fortunate where I have a phenomenal GRC director, Devin, who I think stepped out. Jason, I'm sure, can attest. We're really subject, we're publicly traded, so Sarbanes-Oxley, the SEC requirement, obviously PCI, we're a retailer, right? So we don't have the regulatory hurdles that a bank has. I always say compliance is easy. It's easy to enforce. It's hard to do, but it's easy to enforce because you have to do it. So from a cultural advancement perspective, but having a good GRC leader is very helpful.
Great question. And I'm going to maybe ask one more and open it up for questions for the audience, for online audience. So briefly about incident response. What are some personal lessons that you have learned that you value and teach your teams? Like personally, when I first stepped into cybersecurity, I was thrust into incident response as a brand new analyst, and I had to sit down. It was pretty overwhelming. So for me, keep paying attention to details, like where did this data point come from? Who told you that this is the amount of data exfiltrated? Making sure everything's traceable, that I can, in my head, talk about the incident. Do I have a good wrap around it? So personally, when I deal with incidents, these are the questions that I have that I take my time, take a deep breath, really figure it out. Do I understand what happened here? What are some personal lessons you have that you come back to every time you have to deal with that?
So one thing I'll share that is unique to us, I believe. Recently, within the last 6 months, we made the decision. First of all, how many of you have worked in restaurant or hospitality industry, like back in the day, restaurant, bartender, that kind of stuff? So in that industry, you have front of house and back of house. Right, so you go to a restaurant, front of house is your host and your servers and your bartender, the people who you see, people who bring you your meal, the people who take your order. Back of house are your cooks and your dishwashers and the prep folks and et cetera. You don't see them, but they're the heart of the house, back of the house or heart of the house. And so we made a decision to move incident response within our GRC function. We see, and that includes the SOC as well. We see the GRC function of our team as the front of house. That is the team that people see. That's your policies, that's your security awareness, your risk. And so One of our earlier observations is that when we have an incident, well, A, we need to have really strong playbooks. So our GRC team, they're already strong at policies, right, and playbooks. So playbooks need to be strong, and also the individuals on that incident response capability, they need to have that front of house, visible level of comfort, because they're the ones that are communicating at all levels of the organization. They need to be comfortable talking to the lawyers in internal audit and potentially the insurance company, right? So we made that move recently. So I can tell you the jury is out if it's like the best idea ever, and I will give more talks on it potentially. But I would say in the 6 months, it's actually made a lot of sense to move that incident response function within the GRC realm.
That's a good point.
I think one of the things when we were just having this conversation, and it sounded crazy, and I went back to the team and I said, I don't think I want any superstars in my incident response process. I would rather have the process. Because what I found is when you're in the throes of the scenario, there's probably 3 or 4 people that are front and center, and they're really kind of leading a good portion of that effort. But my question is if those 3 people are gone or they're not around, who steps up? And so if you go through your drill, you go through your tabletop, and it's fantastic, and they always are, because you always solve it. I don't think I've had one where we didn't solve it in the end, so I guess we're all doing a good job. But I always kept asking myself, I was like, what would happen if these 3 people weren't here? Like, who else would be the person to step in? And so I would say almost in that case, don't get me wrong, I love a good superstar, but in that case, I don't want the superstar, I want the process. So that regardless of who's in the role, they can step in and execute. Now, it always helps to have them, and we want them, no doubt. But what I found was like, listen, I just need that person who can understand what needs to happen and execute. We can crown them superstar later, but that's the one time I would say I don't want the superstar, I want the process. So that for me was one.
Yeah, the process at a smaller organization has been great. It just, we end up using the people who are already triaging the tickets on a day-to-day basis. So they're used to speaking with all parts of the organization already. And keeping it as a part of your standard process has made it be more efficient. And I guess, for lack of a better term, it just feels right for us. You're going through a tough time, and to have at least one piece that feels right, that's pretty good.
Thank you. We'll open it up for questions. Please wait until you have a mic before asking the question, but are there any questions in the audience? There's one question here. Can we have a mic in the middle? It's coming. Right there. I think the lady in the blue jacket first, and then the lady in green.
Ready?
Thank you. Very interesting knowledge you are sharing. So I have a question that this information technology, and especially this cybersecurity, is such a dynamic environment. Like every 6 months, there is something new coming up. This is so much evolving and emerging trends. So my question is how you keep up with this new emerging trends, and how you educate yourself on the top of the innovations.
For myself, I just really like to keep up on that type of news. It's interesting to me. So when I have various feeds from vendors and, for lack of a better term, pop tech that provides enough information like, oh, I should maybe dive a little deeper on this, and myself and the team will look at it, as these new threats are emerging. So if it happens to us, we're ready.
Yeah, I think anyone that's, and I think probably a lot of people will attest to this, anybody that's in the space and been in the space will tell you that most of them are, they're learners. We're lifelong learners. We just do it by innately, right? And so I think that's one piece for us. I think that drives a lot of it. But I would say the also one is the community. Don't discount the community. If you build a strong bench and you've got a great community of people that are there, especially if they've been with you, since the 2000s, we lean on each other. Like, there's been times where I call, hey, listen, I got a problem. I don't know what in the world is going on. we hop on a WebEx, hop on the Zoom, and we can work through things. So you don't always have to have the answers, but having the people that have the answers, that is when you know that you're really doing it right. So I would say invest in that community, and commit to learning. Like it doesn't have to be a lot. Even if you're reading a few blog posts, a couple times a week, that gets you what you need. It doesn't change that much, to be clear. It's small, minute things. Now, we can get into the nitty-gritty details, but it's not changing overnight like those are marketing guys. Don't listen to those guys, right? But we know where it's going. Most times people here, we can see the conversation. We know where the threads are going, and we really kind of lean on community. So that will be what I would say.
I love what you said, Aunudrei, especially about community. And that includes our vendors, right? So our friends across in the expo hall, I've learned I've learned things from a lot of my vendor partners by building those relationships with them, right? Mm-hmm. So in addition to the feeds, I think that our vendor partners can be a really rich source of information, and it's worthwhile to build relationships with them.
Next question.
Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Hey, Tina. And hi, everyone. I think many of us in the audience have considered CISO jobs before, right? Or even held them, and now with the increasing legal liabilities that can come with the role, I'm really interested in how are you all handling that. I've heard of some CISO friends getting special insurance individually and at the company level. But in terms of that, for people in the audience who might be thinking about that role, how are each of you handling that legal liability question? And what is your advice for aspiring CISOs?
I think that it's really important for CISO or CISO equivalents to ensure that decisions are documented. So whether that decision is made by myself or my immediate leadership team or the business, decisions need to be well documented so that there is a distinct record of this decision was made for this reason, and it's time-stamped. And I think that's something that CISOs and CISO equivalents need to do. And it's good for the organization, right? Because things change. What was a good idea 6 months ago might not be a good idea today, and vice versa. But I think that's incredibly important. Yep. Thanks, Lisa.
Just to echo what Tina said, in addition to doing that and going through that documentation process, I've found that that's actually given senior leadership the space to think more about those issues before dismissing them. So it's been very helpful in being able to implement the various projects that I think we need to be doing.
She killed it. I'm good.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So I have a quick follow-up question, if you don't mind. Okay. So as you're negotiating your role, what do you negotiate as part of a CISO role? Is there anything that you guys looked out for or asked for that to help protect you in those scenarios where legal liability becomes an issue?
So it really depends on the organization, but director and officer insurance opportunities are certainly something that CISO or CISO equivalent should be thinking about and talking about with their leadership as part of not only their negotiations when starting a new position, but also if you are in a position where you're put in that spot and you're making those decisions, that is D&O insurance is something that should be of consideration. So I would suggest to those aspiring to be in that position, do some research, because there are a lot of different nuances. That's a great question.
Yeah, I think there was there was a special one, I want to say a webcast, actually I think it was last week, on this very topic, and they talked through the different conversations, the different avenues, and there's actually, I'll have to find it, there's an organization that this is really what they specialize in. So for CISOs coming into the role thinking about it, just the ramifications, challenges, all the types of insurance you would need, and then they kind of give you like more like a kind of an onboarding to the process, the stuff that you need would take to take into the process. So I'll have to find out what, and I can't think of what it was. There's so many webinars. I'll find it, and if you just can make a connection on LinkedIn, I'll find it and forward it to you.
Perfect. Next question. Raise your hand. Over here.
I was wondering what you think is your one quality that makes you effective at your job, like the top one.
I think for me, I just have a resiliency. You're gonna get a lot of pushback over time from either an incident that's actively occurring or it's not the right time for the business to explore a certain technology, and you need to be able to take that feedback and bounce back and be effective.
I'll say this is a good quality for work, but then at the same time say that my wife hates this. So let me just put that out there. Most people that are in IT are inherently we're fixers. And what I've come to understand apparently is that everything that my wife says, she doesn't need me to fix. So that's number one. And I think for me, the biggest thing in the topic is just the ultimate desire to want to solve the problem, right, at the end of the day. And I think as you get more experience in the space, you understand what you need to do to get those problems, things solved. So I think ultimately when you go in with the intention to solve the problem through any means possible, I think that kind of comes through to people and they understand that you're there to help. And I think that obviously gives me the best opportunity to be good at what I do, regardless of what my wife says.
So I mentioned at the open that I'm not your typical central casting cybersecurity leader. I actually have a background in the arts, so music, theater, and I think that unlocks a certain part of the brain that really has served me well throughout my cybersecurity career and really looking at things differently, which I think then really confirms why diversity is important, including diversity of thought and ways of thinking, right? So I just feel like that has served me well in my career, just kind of looking at things differently and coming up with creative solutions. So I talked about GRC and incident response, and earlier talked about EA and cyber, and just kind of trying new things. And you know what? If it doesn't work, then let's try something else.
Awesome. All right. Any questions from online or in the room? All right. I have a question. Just one word. Cybersecurity. Do you prefer your teams in person, or doesn't matter?
So controversial.
We just had this conversation over at the table earlier, and we were talking through this. We're online, right? I believe that when you're first coming into the space, the opportunity to connect with a mentor, the opportunity to connect with a sponsor, the opportunity to connect with an SME, if I would not have had that early in my career, I'm not sure I would have made it, right? So for me, coming in and getting that chance to connect that person with your rock star, your superstar, or the person that has those soft skills that you know are going to be necessary for me, I struggle with that, right? And I know that a lot of times we lose a lot of the younger people coming in because they want to work remote, which I don't know what the world that means, but okay. So I would say I think when they're early on in the career, I kind of want to have them pair with someone who can really be that mentor, be that North Star for them. As you get older in the space, you get more kind of seasoned. I think, you know, obviously it probably can be more of a hybrid approach. We're more of a 3-2, so we're usually in 3 days and home 2, and that works very well. I think we're all finding new ways to adjust to this. I just think it depends on what your team is. I will say as a leader, it is tougher when you're a hybrid, right? And because you don't get those normal body cues, you don't get those things to see where your team is at. And so it requires more effort. We're having more conversations. I'm asking you how you feel more. You may not want to talk about those types of things, but I can't tell, through WebEx, regardless of what Cisco tells you. So I'm trying to figure out ways to make that connection with my team to make sure that we're on the same page, because there can be a lot of reasons that you leave. I don't want it to be because I didn't make the connection with you and you didn't stay with me. So for me, if I have my choice when they're early on in career, I want to have them there so I can make sure they get the right. But as they get older and figure it out, man, do what you do. That's kind of where I sit on it.
In my role, I walked into a highly distributed team that I was the only member in Minneapolis. So I was meeting with my team over Zoom, either daily in some cases, but then weekly later, just making sure to travel and seeing them work in their environment a couple times a year. And, when the change happened for a lot of us, there was no change for me. I was still meeting everybody on Zoom or Teams. And I can definitely see early in my career, I had a lot of local people, co-located with me to assist me or manage vendors that were very helpful in humoring me to be hands-on with what used to be their equipment and was now mine. I was going to make mistakes, but always made sure to put the pieces back. So there's no one right way to go about it, but as long as you're able to communicate and make connections, I think that's what's important with working with your team.
So I spent 8 years at Target, and they had a movement called Work for Your Day, right? Some days it's helpful to be in the office and show your face. Some days your hands on keyboard, and to spend, I live 45 miles from the office, 2 hours in my car, doesn't make a lot of sense. Sleep Number currently has a 3-day in-week requirement. Wednesday is our in-office day. We do have individuals that do have an accommodation, so we do have a process for that. So I do have people on my team who do work remote, even though they are locally. I also have people on my team, as I mentioned, my enterprise architect lives in Tampa, Florida, right? So I've met him one time in real life, even though I've been working with him for 2.5 years. So I just, if it were up to me, I think that there are certain jobs that, again, kind of the hands-on keyboard jobs, where, gosh, you're going to make them sit in their car, right? I think that there should be more consideration and, more, I guess, tailoring towards the certain job types. But there are certain jobs where it's like, you know what, I need you in the office. We're going to whiteboard some stuff together, right? So it's just kind of that work for your day. What are you trying to accomplish? I'd like to see a little bit more flexibility with that on top, I think, of the hybrid approach. I think that would be a good approach. So.
For sure. Last call for questions. Otherwise, we will. There's a question. Oh, right there. Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm David. I'd like to know if you get yourselves involved in the HR hiring process, because most of the times you look at these jobs being published online, and we're all in the industry of problem solving, but then it looks like when it comes to the HR side of things, it's still pretty archaic, where you have to fill in all of these things when you have them on your CV. Do you actively get involved in that process and make sure that that problem solving is seen in the HR department as well?
I insert myself to the point where our recruiters have a disdain for me. Because, and I adore our recruiters, by the way. I want to see all the resumes that came in. And they're professionals, they're going to do their screening. But I consider myself, as a cybersecurity leader, it is my job to be a leader, but also be a recruiter and be part of that process. Post and pray doesn't work. And in many cases, post and pray, you're not going to get the right candidates. You're not going to get diverse thought or diverse candidates. So I insert myself to a fault.
Yeah, I try to have a pretty good relationship with our HR person just in general, just because I feel like it promotes more conversation. But I think when you're looking at the roles, a lot of times if they're looking at specified things specific to the job itself, they may miss important things that are on that resume. The person's worked in the call center for a long time and they're still there and they stay there. That means they have a little resilience. So those are those little things that you may see on a resume. You may see the transition happening, but you can understand how it happened. They were maybe at a call center, went and did this. Now it may not be one-to-one specific to the job, but if I can see the progression and I can understand the path that this person has come down and how they got here, I want to talk to them. At the worst, I might say, listen, I don't know a role right now for me, but hey, Tina's got a role that you'd be perfect for. So I think when we see that role, to the degree that you can insert yourself into the process, maybe not that much, but to the degree that you can, right, I think it's definitely good. Because you never know what that next rock star is going to look like. And if we're allowing AI, or not that I have anything against AI, or ML to screen, and that becomes the deciding factor, we're never going to make the dent in this place that we need to. So when you can, right, and when it makes sense, yeah, have the relationships and make sure that you're part of the process. Good question, by the way.
Yeah, and I think it's especially important for people in our roles because we may have an outsized relationship compared to the rest of the business with HR because we all are already working with onboarding and offboarding and everything in between. So you can definitely leverage that relationship to make sure you're being open to more candidates and yeah, finding that next person.
Very good. Thank you for that. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists. One round of applause for them.